witnessing the growth of our truest true. Learning about yourself and returning to food.
Hi, I'm Sherry Strong, author and illustrator of Return to Food, the Life-Changing Anti-Diet. Now, people have asked me why I included illustrations in the book instead of pictures of food, and that's a pretty normal and natural question to ask. Well, the origin, I'm going to tell you the story of the origin of why I started to put the illustrations in. About 8 years ago now, my best friend was moving to London. She just got married, and we had this, and she just turned 40. Oh, actually, it's 9 years ago now. Anyway, we had this policy with each other that we would only exchange gifts that really we wanted to give. And what we mean by that is that sometimes you just give a gift because it's someone's birthday and you feel compelled to, but you haven't figured out the right thing to get them. So we developed this policy that we would just find the right thing, and even if it was a bit late, we do that. So when she was leaving, I decided that I would write and illustrate her life story, because she had a fabulous life story, very interesting, and as a result is, I believe, an absolutely amazing person. So I wanted to document it, and so I did a little storyboard of it, and then I found one of these beautiful cloth-bound books that were blank, and it was green, just like this one, only it was in better shape than this one is. This one's being dragged around the world a few times. And I started to illustrate her life story. Anyway, I gave it to her on her birthday. There's a funny story about that, in that the week before I was showing her girlfriends at a goodbye dinner what I was making for her, and I hand wrote all the information. I didn't include any printed material. It was all written by hand. And I'd shown the girls, and they were delighted with it. And she came back to the table, and I quickly hid it. And for some reason, I don't know how it happened, but the conversation came around. And she said, "Oh my God, your handwriting." She said, "I absolutely hate your handwriting. I can't read it." And here I was just about to finish, having just handwritten her whole entire book, and was absolutely horrified. Anyway, turns out she absolutely loved it, and my writing was much more neater than I normally do in a greeting card. But she loved it and cherished it so much that I remember at one point when she was living in London, she told me she'd put it on the coffee table, and her husband said to her, "Oh, no, it's too precious to kind of have out. You need to kind of protect it and keep it for special occasions." And I was really touched by that. One, because her husband is a very successful children's author, writes under a pseudonym, and novelist. And he knows a thing or two about books, and in particular illustrated books. So it was a real beautiful compliment for me. Something like that. Anyway, it was actually him, and because he writes under a pseudonym, I'm going to protect the identity of the author in question. He suggested that the philosophies that I was teaching might actually suit the illustrations in the book. And although the book that we see here today is very different to the book that I had envisaged from this kind of cloth-bound version,
I first thought that
it carries all the sentiments. This book, it was based on the primary philosophy that I was teaching was Nature's Principle, and I actually called it the Nature Principle when I had the domain name, and since changed it. You can see that it has copyright 2006 there, or you may not be able to see it, but that's where it was. And it started out with 2 illustrations. One was the disclaimer, based on my quirky way of writing and illustrating. And the second is a dedication to my mom and dad, who have always been an amazing support and inspiration for what I do in the world. So that's kind of where it started. And there you can see some of the pages. You can see that I started out thinking that I would actually write my own book by hand. And then I quickly came over to Helen's way of thinking that perhaps it may not be legible, may not be quite legible for people if I had to do that. So this is probably the first of my illustrations that I really got a sense of how I would actually like them to look. And I'll talk a bit about that later in another video, but I just wanted to let you know that's how the illustrations came to be in the book. When they first started out, people assumed that I was writing a children's book, But because the nature of the information sometimes can actually be quite heavy, I wanted illustrations to kind of lighten it up and create points where people could just open up the book to any page, look at the illustration, and then read in the surrounding information something that actually brought up that point, so they could digest it in bits rather than a buffet all at once that can sometimes be overwhelming. If you'd like to check out the book, it's called Return to Food, The Life-Changing Anti-Diet. And if you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments boxes below. And thank you for this time of checking out my illustrations in Return to Food.